Hi there. Welcome to Social Media Fridays. We meet each week to discuss the myriad entries placed on the Social Media Fridays community. We are swamped with them today. We've got a total of 2. And I'd just like to remind you that you're welcome to add topics of interest that happened this week in the world of social media, and we will discuss them here. You're also welcome to join us. With us today we have Edwin Jonk, CEO of IDEST Host in the Netherlands. That's spelled IDEST, HOST.nl. We have Masataki Wasa, who is webmaster of wasaweb.net. He's also a Google top contributor on the AdSense and also the Google Plus Help community. And Meher Bhagat is a social media queen from New Delhi in India. All right, let me figure out which button to click, and let's have a look at our first question. And it is 10 key factors that will determine the future of Google Plus. Was an article posted on Copyblogger, and the last line went something like, I can't remember now, but it was something like, Google Plus has a future. And yet Eric Enger chose to post his article not on Google Plus, but on Copyblogger. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, guys, what do you have to say about this one? Nothing, apparently.
Eric first points out that Google doesn't really have a good track record with regard to social media. They had Wave, which they killed, Orchid, which they killed. So I think it's just fair for tech journalists to expect Google Plus to fail, which Eric calls them media piranhas. And then he lists 5 things against Google Plus and 5 things for Google Plus.
Yeah, I think Eric had a bit of each way with this article. I like the way he did it, though. He brought, he covered a lot of ground in that article, but it seemed to me it was more of a, gee, we've got to fit something in this slot because everybody else is doing it. Meher Bhagat, I think your microphone is muted.
Hi, I just got in.
I've got to say, I love that new profile pic.
Thank you so much.
All right. Masataki, do you have any comments on this one?
No, I think I agree with the general content of the article, and I think the last section, the bottom line for Google, that's the subheading. I think the section is, I would say, spot on. In that, I think they have to persevere with Google Plus. In a sense that it's not a great position to be in that there does not seem to be a viable option other than to build on what is in existence. I don't think, I know. So bullet point number 4 of that section states, what are Google's options if Google Plus is a failure? Google has 3 main options in case if it fails. 1, start over. 2, buy a major competitor. 3, build on what they have. And really, 1 and 2 aren't starting over, building something from scratch again, or purchasing a competitor. These are not viable options.
Yeah. All right. So how do we rate the article? Contentious or non-contentious?
It's because I agree with the general thrust of the arguments. I don't think it is particularly controversial. I think it lays out some of the points very well, the arguments pro and contra. And I think it's a very nice snapshot of where Google Plus is, and it's a picture that I recognize, and how could I put it? It is an analysis that I broadly agree with. So in that sense, I don't see it as contentious, if that makes sense, because I agree with it.
Yep. All right. And do I have any objections to moving on to the next one? Given that we're halfway through our broadcast today already. Okay. This one is contentious. Edward Morbius extrapolated extrapolated his extrapolation and extrapolated the extrapolation of his extrapolation to finally decide that 4 to 6 million people are actively using G+. Well, I agree with Edward. 4 to 6 million people are actively using G+, but there's also another 400 million or whatever number it is, I don't care, of other people who are also actively using G+. I don't know how I really didn't have the energy to try and work out why, but my view is this, that if Google a few months ago closed down Orkut when they have with Orkut had a market share in Brazil of all people on the internet in Brazil of 59%, and 13% of all people on the internet in India, and 4% globally of internet users using Orkut. I don't think Google would waste any time shutting down Google Plus if there really were only 4 to 6 million people actively using Google Plus. I don't doubt that there's been a general trend of Googlers away from Google Plus, and I blame Larry Page for that. He said to the corporation that Google is Google Plus and Google Plus is Google. He said that to them some time ago, but I don't see him saying it these days. I just see that people that I used to see regularly posting have drifted away. Well, particularly from Google anyway. But in my tiny world, it's if anything, it's stronger. And yeah, I believe that Google's days are numbered. Google Plus's days are numbered, I should say, not Google. I think they're numbered, but I don't know how big that number is. But I certainly see that Google as an entity or as an enterprise doesn't look at Google Plus in the same favour that it did when it launched. And that's a shame because Google Plus is perhaps the one network that anybody has ever made that is actually useful. It enables nuance and communication and the sharing of ideas. Whereas the other social networks, really just aren't there. Well, not that I know of anyway, because I don't inhabit any others. But anyway, I'd like to know, after that 2-second discourse, which actually was meant to be 2 seconds, it waffled on a bit. I'd like to know what you guys have to say.
Well, 4 to 6 million active users, well, that is way too low. I don't believe that. What the numbers are, I really don't know. Google isn't telling anything about the numbers.
Should we try and invite Edward Morbius to join us?
Sure.
Let's try it. Well, you go ahead, Edward, and talk while I try and raise Edward.
Okay. Basically, Google isn't telling anything about the active users, but 4 to 6 million active users, that's way too low. I don't think that's true. How he constructed this data was by going through the sitemaps, and in every sitemap he looked at the profile URL and looked if there were posts on that particular profile. And he only used a small sample, and then concluded that it was 90 or 9% of the people that were active. And then he said, well, if from this small test, I say it is 9%. I don't think that is a really good way to construct this, but Mastaki, do you know what the numbers are, the last numbers?
Well, essentially, to quote him, he outlines his methodology on his Hello post, and essentially he looked through the sitemaps and has a last modified date of 17th of January 2015. Rather than downloading 50,000 sitemaps and view the profiles in each of them, he made simplifying assumptions. He based his analysis on arbitrarily selected file, sitemap -25007 -of 50,000.gz. So it's sort of middle in the pack. So he took a card from the middle of the pack, and then that contained 45,429 profile pages, assuming reasonably uniform distribution. 45,429 times 50,000 gives roughly 2.2 billion, and that sort of tallies with the numbers that have been given at other sources. And then then he sort of went through that file to see whether someone has shared or not, and he's looking by X hasn't shared anything with you, so that would mean hasn't shared or not found, probably gone, either deleted or spam, either deleted by the user or by Google, and so on and so forth. And then that from that 9.22% reported something posted publicly. He's run the script, and then it mostly stayed between 8 to 10% range, so it's 9%. of the profiles with any public posting activity, about 37% have as their most recent activity a comment to a YouTube video. Another 8% involved a profile photo change.
Have I lost contact, or sorry, I went over the top of you there, Master.
No. I think I was running out of steam trying to explain stuff in rough. I'd probably butcher the whole thing, but tried to see how the methodology worked. I mean, I think it's a fair assumption.
In the Elo post, he says with almost 8,000 profiles checked, I found 533 with some activity. So and that's quite a low number, right? So he just picked a sitemap in the middle, and then he only looked at a small 8,000 of the profiles. That's not a lot, is it?
It does say with 21,126 profiles, Rep 9.22% report something posted publicly. Under analysis.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so with this nearly 8,000, he found 533 with some activity.
So that was his base, no? And then he doesn't say that he checked 21,000 profiles. He says he only checked a small 8,000 profiles.
Oh, no. 2 paragraphs up.
2 paragraphs up.
So under the subheading analysis, so that's where 21,000 figure comes from, and I think that's to say that I think 9.22% essentially says any public post, I think, and then the 8,000 he checked into 533, and then he looked at the most recent post date. Does that make sense? So it's a smaller sample within that sample. So 9.22%. Yeah. So 9.22% refers.
These have to be public posts, right? Private posts wouldn't be shared.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at a different number, which Larry Page gave. Let me get the date. Larry Page says in January 2012 that there were 90 million active users. So that's a huge gap between a couple of million or 90 million.
Well, it depends how you define active user.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, I don't think there is an agreed, universally agreed definition. I mean, if people sign in and do something, even if it doesn't lead to posting, that may be considered as being active, right? Let's say you log into your Google Plus and then +1 someone's post, then I would think that would count as an active user. That person would count as a monthly active user. Once a month, logs in, +1 something.
Well, of those, in 2012, so that is, that's a long time ago. Of those 90 million, 60% engaged daily and 80% weekly. So,
I do think the numbers.
Do you know if Google approaches celebrities to make profiles like Twitter?
They do in Japan.
Okay.
So I'm not so sure whether I think it's yeah, in Japan they did. They I'm not so sure how the actual tie-up worked, but a particularly popular pop singing group, and that involves a very large number of people, because it's a constant flow of new people coming in, joining the group, and quite a lot of people leaving the group, and all of them have Google Plus profiles, and they have been using Google Plus their as the platform to communicate with their fans. And I've looked some of them; they have huge numbers of followers, and comments almost immediately goes to the limit of 500 very quickly. So yeah, they did that in Japan. So I'm not so sure about other markets. So yeah, I think it depends on market to market as well. And yeah, as you said, 4 to 6 million. That sounds very low. I'm not so sure whether it includes community posts. I'm not so sure whether that will come up. Private posts obviously won't come up, and I'm not so sure how many people use Google Plus to share only to the extended circles or to circles. You know, I, for example, don't use Facebook, my personal Facebook account publicly, but I do use it to communicate with other people. So that won't be seen, for example, on Facebook. I post publicly on Google Plus, and I hadn't for a very long time, as you might recall that I only started to make public posts long after it was launched. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard to. It's obviously, we can only go by what we feel the numbers might be, but it does seem that 4 to 6 million as a figure does really feel very low. Especially if you exclude the YouTube comments. Then it's much lower.
Well, it was an interesting read, but I don't think it tells us much. It was a good try, though.
I think I don't think it should be dismissed out of hand. I mean, it does. He may have picked a particularly inactive card from the pack. That's a possibility.
Yes,
It may just happen to be.
And I'm not sure how those sitemaps are created by Google.
Exactly.
I really don't know.
I don't know either, and I'm not so sure how. Because how are I assume they're automatically updated when people make a post, but are they? You'd think that it's automatically. You'd think they're automatically generated and automatically updated, but who knows? Because if you look on Google search, the actual search engine, rather than any Google Plus internal search, and you do a site search, the site plus.google.com/ your profile, custom URI, or the numeric URI. Not all posts turn up.
Okay, have we exhausted this subject?
Yes.
And we have a viewer there watching. Look, was there anything else, guys, that you'd like to talk about for this episode? All right. Well, it's that time then, because when I click this button, I think I don't think there's another one there, but maybe there is. No, there isn't. All right. So for watching us, we thank you very much. The interest that you show in us makes what we do worthwhile, and for that we are truly grateful. We'll be back at the same time next Friday to do it again. In the Social Media Friday community, Edwin Yonk is just about to place a link to this Hangout that will be off the air. You won't be involved in the public broadcast, but we'd love to have a chat with you. So if you navigate over to the Social Media Fridays community, you'll find that link on the probably the first post. As I said, we'll be back next week to do it all again, and hopefully we'll have more topics to discuss. Thank you.